Chapter 1 of Somme Battle Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Wales. Somme Battle Stories by Alec John Dawson. Chapter 1. What It's Like in the Push. There is nothing of the professional publicist about the average wounded soldier, officer, or man now landing day by day at Southampton. They are all more concerned, thank goodness, with action than speech, with doing things and getting them done, rather than with describing them. It is not, of course, that these heroes of ours are either unwilling or unable to talk. They are almost invariably, and no matter what the nature of their wounds, in the highest of good spirits, delighted to pay a visit to Blighty, happy to have had the chance of playing the fine part they have played in the great Allied offensive, absolutely assured as to the victorious outcome of the push. But they have no very accurate notions as to the relative values of the different, disjointed, staccato, frequently vivid bits of information they have to dispense. With matches, or scraps of paper, or a nicotine-stained forefinger made to serve as pencil in the nearest conveniently dusty surface, they will give you elaborate expositions of the tactics they have helped to work out. Their little lectures on the strategy of the push are frequently couched in language more graphic, racy, and convincing than the most free and easy of generals ever permits himself to use, and their lovable faces sometimes show a glimmer of disappointment, for that one does not take copious notes regarding these demonstrations. But on the other hand, they deprecate with almost pitying wonder the notes one does jot down from time to time in talk with them, when, by accident, they enrich one with some vivid, stabbing little thrust of triumphant scene-painting likely to provide an answer to the constantly reiterated question as to what it's like in the push. "Oh, I say, you know, don't bother about that, Guff. Everybody knows about that, of course. But if you really want to know what the plan was in the blank show, I can tell you in a minute so far as our brigade went. You see, 0 was blank, and we were on the right flank of the blank, etc." At the moment one has specially in mind a young company commander, a captain of the blank, almost the last wounded soldier to be landed from the hospital ship on a certain recent night. He had a good deal of the descriptive gift, and was perfectly unconscious of his occasional use of it. One strained his indulgence a good deal, and took many notes while talking with him. What one sets down here are just the bits he regarded as guff. Convinced that every one knows about that, of course. His fluent strategy and tactics, but I promise they shall be preserved in the archives of his grateful country. Oh, just an ordinary front-line trench, you know, rather chipped about, of course, by the Boche heavies, you know, but oh, hang it, you know what the ordinary fire trench looks like. Along the north side of the Mametz Woods we were. What? Oh, yes, we were packed pretty close, of course, while we were waiting, only got there a little before midnight. My chaps were all in splendid heart, and keen as mustard to get the word go. I was lucky, met my friend G almost directly we got in. He's had months in that bit of the line, and knew every twist of it, so was able to give me tips. He took me along to his dug-out after I got all my chaps in position, and gave me some jolly good hot café au lait. Tell you a funny thing about that dug-out after. Good dug-out, with a darned sight better overhead cover than most, or it wouldn't have been there after the pounding the line had had in the week before. G had a magnificent arrangement for cooking. I forget the name of the stove, but you pump it up like a bicycle tire, and then it burns like the deuce. Gives you a hot drink before you can turn around. I'm going to have one before I go back. We had 2 good-sized kettles, and after we'd finished our drink we ran a regular canteen for about half an hour. boiling up café au lait as fast as the machine would turn it out, and dishing it out all along the line of my fellows in their mess tins. The weather was jolly just then, but there'd been a lot of rain, and the trench was in a beastly state. You know what it's like after a lot of strafing, when you get heavy rains on the churned up ground. It was like porridge with syrup over it, and we were all absolutely plastered, hair and moustaches and everything, before we'd been half an hour in the place. The Boche was crumping us pretty heavy all the time, but it didn't really matter, because for some reason he hadn't seemed to have got our range just right, and nearly all his big stuff was landing in front, or behind, and giving us very little but the mud of it. What did worry me a bit was his machine guns. His snipers, too, seemed fairly on the spot, though how the devil they could be, with our artillery as busy as it was, I can't think. But I know several of my sentries were laid out by rifle bullets. I particularly wanted to let the others get a smoke when they could, seeing we'd be there 3 or 4 hours. Helps to keep 'em steady in the waiting, you know. But we had to be mighty careful about matches, the Boches being no more than 100 yards off. I hate the feeling of that stinking porridgey clay caking on your hands and face, don't you? But one didn't notice it after a bit, because it was the same all over. But one had to watch out for rifles and ammunition and that, you know. Pretty easy to get all the rifle barrels bunged up in the dark, you know. Our adjutant came along about 3, checking up watches and giving us divisional time. Mine was all right, never stopped once from the day I bought it till that left wrist of mine was hit. See? It registers my first hit, 8:26. I'll keep that, souvenir, but I'm afraid it's done as a timekeeper. Just before 3 I got my position right in the middle of my company. We were going over at 8:25, you know. The trench was deep there, with a hell of a lot of mud and water, but there was no set parapet left, just a gradual slope of muck, as though cartloads of it had been dropped from the sky by giants, spilt porridge. I wanted to be first out, if I could, good effect on the men, you know, but I couldn't trust myself amid all that muck, so I'd collared a rum case from Blank's dugout, and was nursing the blooming thing, so that when the time came I could plant it in the mud, and get a bit of a spring from that. Glad I did, too. I passed the word along at 1/4 to be ready for my whistle, but it was all you could do to make a fellow hear by shouting in his ear. Our heavies were giving it lip then, I can tell you. I was in a devil of a stew lest some of my chaps should get over too soon. They kept wriggling up and forward in the mud. They were frightfully keen to get moving. I gathered from my sergeant their one fear was that if we couldn't soon get going, our artillery would have left no strafing for us to do. Little they knew their Boche, if they thought that. I thought I could just make out our artillery lift about a minute and a half before the 25, but I wouldn't swear to it. On the stroke of the 25 I got a good jump from my rum box and fell head first into a little pool. Whiz-bang hole, I suppose. Something small. It loosened 2 of my front teeth pretty much. I'd my whistle in my teeth, you see. But I blew like blazes directly I got my head up. Never made a sound. Whistle full of mud. But it didn't matter a bit. They all saw me take my dive, and a lot were in front of me when I got going. But I overhauled 'em and got in front. I believe we must have got nearly 50 yards without a casualty. But it's hard to say. It wasn't light, you know, just a glimmering kind of a grayness. Not easy to spot casualties. The row, of course, was deafening, and we were running like lamplighters. You remember our practice stunts at home? Short rushes and taking cover in folds of the ground? Remember your file of directions, sir? Dressin' by the right and all that? Oh, the boys remembered it right enough, but good Lord, it wasn't much like Salisbury Plain. We were going hell for leather, you know. You think you're going strong, and whoosh! You've put your face deep in porridge, fallen in a shell hole. You trip over some blame thing, and you turn a complete somersault, and you're on again, not quite sure which end of you is up. spitting out mud, wondering where your second wind is. Lord, you haven't a notion whether you're hit or not. I felt that smack on my left wrist, along with a dozen other smacks of one sort or another, but I didn't know it was a wound for an hour or more. All you thought about was trying to keep your rifle muzzle up, and I guess the fellows behind must have thought a bit about not sticking us with their bayonets more'n they could help. I was shouting blank, the local name of the regiment, you know. The boys like it, but my sergeant, who was close to me, was just yelling, "Down 'em, boys!" and "Stick 'em! Stick 'em!" for all he was worth. My lot were bound for the second line, you see. My No. 12 platoon, with 18 of D, were to look after cleaning up the Boche first line. There was no real parapet left in that Boche front line. Their trench was just a sort of gash, a ragged crack in the porridge. Where I was, there was quite a bit of their wire left. But do you know, one didn't feel it a bit. You can judge a bit from my rage what it was like. We went at it like fellows in a race charge the tape, and it didn't hurt us any more. Only thing that worried us was the porridge and the holes. Your feet sinking down make you feel you're crawling, making no headway. I wish I could have seen a bit better. It was all a muddy blur to me. But I made out a line of faces in the Boche ditch, and I know I gave a devil of a yell as we jumped for those faces. Lost my rifle there. 'Fraid I didn't stick my man really, because my bayonet struck solid earth. I just smashed my fellow. We went down into the muck together, and another chap trod on my neck for a moment. Makes you think quick, I tell you. I pulled that chap down on top of my other Boche, and just took one good look to make sure he was a Boche, and then I gave him 2 rounds from my revolver with the barrel in his face. I think I killed the under one too, but can't be sure. Next thing I knew we were scrambling on to the second line. It was in the wire of the second line that I got my knockout, this shoulder and some splinters in my head. Oh yes, bomb. I was out of business then, but as the light grew I could see my chaps having the time of their lives inside that second line. One of 'em hauled me in after a bit, and I got a drink of beer in a big Boche dug-out down 2 separate flights of steps. My hat, that beer was good, though it was German. But look here, I'm in No. 5 train, that chap's calling. I must get ashore. Just want to tell you about that dug-out of G's in our own line, you know. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'd got the Byzantine Wood all right then, when my orderly, who never got a scratch, was helping me back, making for our dressing station. We crawled into what had been a trench, and while I was taking a breather I sort of looked around and made out a bit here and a bend there. Begad, it was the trench we started from. Seems nothing, but you've no idea how odd it was to me, like dropping into a bit of England after about a century and a half in some special kind of hell, you know. Seemed so devilish odd that any mortal thing should be the same anywhere after that day. Not that it was the same, really. My rum case was in splinters, sticking up out of the porridge, and I found my map case there, torn off my belt as we got over at 8:25. Won't be much left of that dug-out, I thought, and I got my orderly to help me along to see. Couldn't find the blessed thing anyhow. Went backwards and forwards 3 or 4 times. Then I spotted the head of a long trench stick that G had carried poking out through soft earth at the back of the trench. The orderly worked that stick about a little, and the earth fell away. It was just loose, dry stuff, blown off the roof of the dug-out and blocking the little entrance. Came away at a touch almost, and there was the little hole you got in by. I worried through somehow. I was really curious to see. If you'll believe me, the inside of that dug-out, it looked like a drawing room to me after the outside, you know. It was just exactly the same as when we'd left it the night before. There was the fine stove we made the café au lait on, with a half-empty box of matches balanced on the side of it, and the last empty tin of the coffee stuff we'd used, with the broken-handled spoon standing up in it, just as I'd left it. And G's notebook lying open and face down on an air pillow in his bunk, most extraordinary homely. There was I, looking at his notebook, and his hold all, and poor G dead. Yes, I'd seen his body, and the rats too. The rats were cavorting around on the felt of the roof, happy as sandboys. They didn't know anything about the Push, I suppose. By the way, we found only dead rats in the Boche trenches. They say it was our gas. I don't know, but there were thousands of dead rats there, and millions of live fleas. Very live they were. I must get. Cheerio. End of chapter 1.